Okay, hello. This is the Fierce and the Dead YouTube channel. I'm here with the man David Elliott from the Mighty Bad Elephant Music. I'm just going to have a chat to him about the label and his life and the things he's been doing. So, David, why did you start a record label?
Hi, Matt. Why did I start a record label? Well, I was bored. I've been going right back. I've been involved with music in some way, shape, or form for a very long time. And latterly, it sort of as I slipped into my old age, I started doing a podcast, which of course you remember very well, because that was kind of how we met. And it sort of morphed into the label because I was aware from talking to lots of musicians that they were really up for creating great music, but they were just didn't want to get involved with all the sort of the nasty nitty gritty of making records. And I can sort of understand that because it's a fairly grubby business at the best of times. But no, I mean, it was really just out of a desire to sort of make a contribution to the music world in a way which I can, because although I'm a sort of I dabble with music myself, I'll never be much good at it. So setting up a label to handle the sort of the business side of things, and actually increasingly the sales side of it as well, is something that we've got involved with, which we originally didn't anticipate we'd be doing.
So, do you think musicians know much about how the music industry works?
Well, some do and some don't. I mean, yeah, there are those who know quite a lot about it. Like, for instance, yourself. You know, I've picked up a fair bit of stuff from you about the way that certain aspects of it work. Others perhaps not so much. And in a sense, why should they? You know, they want to be creating. They want to spend their time, which is in the vast majority of cases, it's their spare time. They want to spend time writing and recording music and playing gigs and so on. So, yeah, although we try to educate people about how the sort of the industry works, on another level, yeah, if they don't really feel the need to know and they trust us to sort of get on with it, then we'll just get on with it, you know.
I have to at this point say David is the most honest man in the music industry. I'm not sure even that it's a good thing, but he is the most honest bloke out there, and very trustworthy gentleman. I'm not very good at saying, we're men and we're not very good at saying nice things about each other, but David is a very, very honest man. What makes you want to sign a band, David?
Well, first and foremost, I have to like their music. So, you know, it has to be something which sort of falls within our wheelhouse, as our American cousins might say, something which kind of sort of fits in with my tastes. But then also increasingly, as the label has kind of sort of come together over the last 5 or 6 years, something which fits in with the portfolio of what we do. So I think it would be a bit weird if a sort of a hardcore rap act were to send us a demo, because it doesn't really fit in with what we do otherwise. I think we're fairly eclectic, but you can take that too far. So what we've concentrated on, I think, is the sort of it's nearly all rock music, or there's been some sort of acoustic, more sort of folky singer-songwriter stuff, but it is rock stuff, a lot of progressive rock, as you know, but also venturing into more sort of metal-y territory, sort of pop rock stuff, you know, a real sort of mixture of things. But what I'm always looking for really is something that I listen to, I think, oh, that's good, I like that, and which kind of piques my interest. It also helps if it's something that I think we can sell enough of to make our money back and to not lose on it.
So there's an element of commerciality in that. Basically, the thing is to not lose any money, because I mean it doesn't ultimately serve anybody, because the artist won't come away from it happy, and secondly, it means it makes it more difficult for you to run Bad Elephant, doesn't it? So
that's it. I mean, we have to, you know, we have certain bills to pay. We run it as a fairly sort of lean enterprise. I mean, none of us are expecting to make. No one makes a salary out of it, for example. You know, we don't make any money out of it for ourselves, but yeah, there has to be a certain amount of commercial sensibility involved, as you say, for the satisfaction of the artist as well, because, you know, at the end of the day, if you're making all this music and you're not getting anything out of it, yeah, even just enough to pay the petrol to the next gig or something, then it's a fairly sort of chastening and miserable experience, I suspect. So,
I mean, really, at the sort of small band level, and the sort of a lot of it's, if you can just cover your costs, you're winning, aren't you? So
yeah,
and it's the whole thing of cover your costs, try and grow the fan base, isn't it?
That's what I try and do. So I'll only take a band on if I feel we can do the release in a way which will cover costs. And if it's more than that, then brilliant.
So if you could sign any band, who would you sign at the moment?
Oh, gracious, that's a very difficult question. And the reason it's a difficult question is that actually I've sort of, we are already working with a lot of my favourite bands. I mean, there's a bit of chicken and egg going on there, I suppose, in that one of the reasons they're my favourite bands is that they're signed to the label.
You have to listen to them.
Well, I enjoy listening to them. I enjoy listening to them. If we're sort of talking, up in the stratosphere, and, you know, sort of, if Bad Elephant was a much bigger enterprise, I'd like to work with bands of the sort who have a sort of a questing and progressive approach, not a prog rock approach, but a progressive approach. So your Radioheads, for example, you know, who I don't pretend to like everything that Radiohead have done, but I think they have a really interesting approach to making music. So it's those sorts of bands who I think sort of appeal to me.
The label I always think, when I think Bad Elephant, I think you're like a modern version of Delirium. I think they put out a lot of really, really strong records. I mean, it was an underground label, but they put out good stuff. I mean, I've got a Delirium compilation. It's absolutely brilliant. It's like a last days of the, I mean, it's a psychedelic, all their Porcupine Tree and all that stuff. It's a really good compilation album. And I think, you know, there was an aesthetic to it. All the bands didn't sound the same. It wasn't like, you know, a lot of labels where it's just, they basically signed the same band over and over again. I think, but they had an aesthetic. They had a thing, which I think is something, you know, Bad Elephants had, and it's grown the UK scene. And I think, you know, a lot of those bands, they wouldn't really fit on another label, would they? It was you guys who sort of built that scene and built that culture. And I think, you know, the last 10 years, I mean, especially, you know, obviously in the current situation of the event, you know, with the reason we're stuck in our houses.
The current unpleasantness.
The current unpleasantness is, I've had a chance to have a think of the last 10 years, and, you know, it's been, there's been a lot of things happen, you know, with Bad Elephant, and there was like all those sort of prog magazine, and then there was all that sort of art tangent stuff came through as well. And then there's all the psychedelic festivals like your Cosmic Cosfest and all those, you know, those sort of things where, you know, bands like a Big Hog or an Orange Clocks could play, and there wasn't necessarily that sort of thing. And then there was Art Tangent where there's bands, sort of the instrumental post-rocky bands. There wasn't really an audience. So in the last 10 years, there's been this sort of audience for different niche music come along, and I think Bad Elephant has very much been part of that. And I think Bad Elephant, you know, there's been a few sort of niche labels, but I think you guys have been really, you know, quite influential, especially within what is broadly termed progressive, but certainly not prog. Because as I argued with a gentleman the other day, that I spoke to this guy with one of these well actually chaps who said, well, prog is this, and you can't, and it's, you know, I think progressive is an attitude, like you said with Radiohead, they're a progressive band, aren't they? So
yes,
I'm sure we'll get a comment on this video by someone saying, and I've got it completely wrong. So
Well, that's fine. I mean, people think about things in their own way. Um, it's kind of I'm another term which we use is genre fluid,
that's cool.
which is a bit cheeky, really.
No, it's cool.
It's cheeky for two reasons. One is the obvious one. The other is the fact that I nicked it from Carver's. But genre fluid, it's boils down to there's only two types of music. There's music I like and there's music I don't like. And also, just to make the point that music that I don't like is not necessarily bad music.
I think as well, people like myself or Carvis or a lot of the people like have come along in the last 10 years. I mean, obviously me and Carvis have been doing it for a lot longer than that, but I think we wouldn't have stood a chance without the internet and the niche sort of. I think it's been a lot easier for people to find weird music these days, and it's music that's only got, you can survive a lot less fans now as well.
And that cuts both ways. It works for that's the way it works for the label as well, because without the internet and without the democratization of music that has occurred as a result of being able to use inexpensive studio technology and to have CDs made cheaply and to do downloads and to get your music out there. I mean, there's the whole business about whether or not you generate revenue by using those methods, but that's another story. But without that revolution that sort of occurred in the last sort of 10 to 15 years, Bad Elephant Music wouldn't exist, because we're amateurs at the end of the day. We're not.
Yeah, it's done for joy and enthusiasm, isn't it? And love, and in that's what I love about it, because that's what and that's what gives you the integrity, isn't it? That's what gives you because you can basically go, I don't like this, I don't have to do it. You know what I mean? So
absolutely. I mean,
I haven't got to put this out I haven't got to reissue 40 1970s prog rock albums because that will pay the rent. You could just do what you like, basically, can't you? Because you're free.
Exactly.
As long as you get your money back, you're free, which is.
And as long as, and also there's a certain amount of, we do to an extent kind of rob Peter to pay Paul. So there are some acts on the label who do better than others, and that's for all sorts of reasons. Maybe it's because their music has a wider appeal. Maybe it's because they're able to get out and do more gigs, more promo, and so on. Maybe they've been around longer and they've got the tenure. Well, we generate some profit as a label on those releases, and we will use that sometimes to take a little bit of a punt with stuff which is not so
commercially,
it's perhaps a bit more marginal in terms of how well it might do.
Would you ever, if you heard something you thought would definitely sell, like 30, 40,000 albums, and you knew it would, but it didn't fit with the aesthetic, would you sign it?
No, I wouldn't.
So
and
ultimately, that already makes you different to most labels, isn't it?
And I'm not just saying that because it'll never happen, but I'm saying it because actually I couldn't cope with the pressure. It would be that would sort of take everything up to a whole different ball game, and it wouldn't be sufficient of a step up for us to go fully professional and to make it our living. But then, even if it was, I don't know if I could do it, because I don't know if I could just get behind it.
And also, it wouldn't. It's one of those things that it's enough to take away the bits you love, but not enough to make a living from. So it's still, it's no fun, is it?
No, exactly. Whereas at the moment, it is fun. I listen to the stuff I've got. On the shelf just above my head here, I've got the 81 CDs that we have made, all lined up. And every one of those.
Can you name another label that's put 81 releases out in the last 7 years from new artists?
No, I can't.
I think you might struggle to find that.
I think that might be because no one's quite as bonkers as we are, but there you go.
I think you've put out some wonderful records.
There's a lot of releases.
I think as well, I mean, some of the stuff you put out, I mean, it's too many to mention, really. Simon stuff. Simon
Yeah,
Godfrey, very
the
talented guy.
back and yeah,
Orange Clocks, I love. They're so. Charlie stuff's brilliant. Trojan Horse, but I mean, I'm not going to go through them all because I could literally name everything on there and find something likable and interesting in everything. And it's even if the music's not to my taste, most of the time the people who release it tend to be, there's a certain type of person you've got involved with the label. They're decent people. You know what I mean? I mean, there's
yes, it's
people on there.
mindset. Yeah,
In terms of the music, I mean, I couldn't be more opposite in terms of the, sonically and the stuff I'm into. But in terms of the people, they're nice people. You know what I mean? And I
yes.
think every time we've had a Bad Elephant night or some sort of meetup, everyone's been lovely, really cool people. I think that's a really something to be very proud of, that you've managed to do the label.
I mean, that's also important. Is that if I get a vibe of somebody that makes me think actually you're going to be difficult, then I'll tend to sort of walk away from that.
It's just that if you're doing it for the love of it, why would you want to work with someone who's difficult anyway? You know what I mean?
Exactly. Simply because at the end of the day they're going to be disappointed that they're not going to get out of us what they want, and it's going to be a fairly miserable experience for everyone. So I'd rather just say, look, I don't think this is going to work.
Do you think a lot of musicians have got unrealistic expectations?
I think some have, certainly.
Or have they all been crushed like everyone else?
Well, this is a conversation.
I had dreams.
This is a conversation I've had with my wife on a number of occasions, which is that I'll get a note from somebody. The one I always remember was, and this is way back, was a guy who'd made an album, and it was actually really good. It was kind of progressive metal, which isn't necessarily to my taste, but it was incredibly well done. And it obviously cost him a fortune to make this album, because he'd got some really top session players in to do bits and pieces. No names, no pastoral, but really good players. He'd written the songs and he'd done this album, and he sent it to us in its entirety for us to listen to. And I wrote back to him and said, this is actually really good. I think we could work with this. He said, okay, fine, 8,000 quid and it's yours.
Yeah, you've only got to sell 3 to 5. No, probably about, how many do you have to sell? About
you're going to have to sell
5,000. And was it, if it's of a non-established artist?
Yeah, this is a guy, and no one had heard of him, and he wasn't in a position where he could tour because it was a studio project. And basically what he was looking to do was to sell it to us, and then it becomes our problem. So he walks away with some cash, and we're left with a sort of a king size problem to try and sell this album into a market which,
but no one would be able to. I mean,
never heard of him.
I mean, would you agree that the prog progressive market? I mean, I've known, just to let everyone know, that Dave is one of my closest friends. I'd say he's a really good mate of mine, and I text him about various things I've known 10 years. We've been mates for, haven't we?
Yes, it's probably a bit more than that, actually.
Yeah. So, and we talked about a lot of different stuff, and it's a very difficult to see where the expectations of musicians are quite unrealistic. And things are changing all the time, aren't they? I mean, it's a really,
yes.
we're looking at a situation where would we be? It's very hard to say we're going to be in 10 years' time. So, it's more about like reducing costs and stuff like that at the moment, isn't it?
It's trying to find a way, because the amount of revenue that you can realistically expect to generate has kind of gone down a bit in the sort of the 5 or 6 years that we've been operating. Not as much as you might expect, in that CD sales for us are still relatively healthy, and I think that's partly because the audience that BM artists, they're still buying records. They don't just want to pay their £10 a month and get it on Spotify. So
I think people feel they have a relationship with the label and a relationship
yeah,
with the artist, don't they? I think if
yeah,
people feel they have a relationship, it's like paying their dues into the scout hut, or you know what I mean? It's like that
yes,
they feel
yeah.
they're supporting.
I,
Whereas, you know, mainstream audience don't have that connection, do they?
no, and I know some people buy the albums, they buy the discs, and they never actually listen to them. I know of at least one person who buys pretty much everything we put out, and well, we don't use shrink wrap, so they're not still in their shrink wrap. But he's never played them. He'll download them and he listens to them on his phone, on his computer, or whatever, or on his home media system. But he hasn't actually sort of looked at the. He may have looked at the booklets, but he's never played the CDs. He does it. He buys them because he feels it's important to support the artist, support the label in doing that, and that's really lovely. You know, I'll take that.
Yeah, it's
That's a
great.
really
You know,
nice.
that's
That's
even
a really
better
nice
actually, because
thing.
that's a act of not patronage, isn't it? It's he's saying, I believe in you, and I want to give you £10 for this, and I want to support you. I want £12, whatever much it is.
Exactly.
He's making that
And it,
choice, which is fantastic, isn't it? It's like
and it's
I mean, what do you think? Sort of the move, more streaming and like Patreon and different models and things. How do you think that'll affect what you're doing?
well, it's very difficult to know because streaming's been with us for quite a long time. I mean, ever since we started, it's been there.
I remember, yeah.
But of course, it's now sort of increasingly taking over amongst certain demographics. I think we're insulated from the worst effects of it by what I was saying previously, which is that our audience is still wedded to the idea of some sort of artifact, which they can sort of buy. Um, but what the longer term effects of that are going to be will kind of only come to light, I think, over the coming years, really. In terms of sort of other funding models, as you know, the way that we operate is we sort of it's a produce and distribute model. So we pay for the stuff to be set up, and we will also make in certain situations we'll make contributions to recording costs and so forth, and then we recoup that, and then we split the any profits down the middle. Now, a lot of bands, I think of individual bands using things like Patreon, or in the past they may have gone for Kickstarters, and so I think for individual bands, if that's a model that works, then brilliant. A lot of people do it. I think it would be dishonest for a label to do that. Certainly a label that's set up the way that we do it, because I don't want to be in a position where I have to commit absolutely to producing something when there are so many variables which may not enable us to do it. Individual bands are in a position where they can be much more certain of what they're doing.
Have you seen like Holy Raw do? And they do I think it's every month or every other month. They've got it out like a club, and you can sign up for it, and you get that album. You know, like you'll get one album every month or every other month. So it's a guaranteed thing, and that might work well for the label.
Yeah, the difficulty with that is making sure you've got enough material to do it.
Because it might put a lot of pressure on you if there's. I mean, like I say there was a global pandemic or something like that.
Yes, in the unlikely event.
Unlikely event, but so say there was something like that. I mean, the problem you've got as well is, you know, my worry with everything we do is that I think the relationships you have with your audience are really precious, and if you upset those people or damage those it's very hard to get people back on board once you lose.
That can be irreparable. Yeah, absolutely.
And you know, and you know, you think, well, you might have lost somebody for one album, but they might, over the course of it, you know, the time they've been supporting you, they might spend £200 or £300 if they, you know, the different various incomes and stuff. And you don't want to lose that. And also, I you know, as being a soft old, I don't really like making enemies or upsetting people as well. I mean,
no, I don't either.
Try not to, but I very rarely do. But I mean, always going to be some what's it, but Most,
I think
I mean, touch wood. I
there's a
don't think.
similar thing. Yeah, there's a similar thing going on with us in that there are people who are real Bad Elephant
Hmm,
followers, and I think that's remarkable personally
brilliant.
because they're basically if they're buying everything we do, they're buying an astonishingly wide range of music. Um,
Hmm,
but I think that's lovely, and I
brilliant.
don't want those people to get pissed off. There's one guy, Andy, he won't mind me mentioning him by name, who basically he buys everything on the morning of pre-order opening.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
And
Nice dude.
I saw him a little while ago at a gig, and he said to me, "You've never let me down yet.
Oh,
Everything
bless him.
you've released has been something that I've enjoyed."
Oh,
And
lovely.
I actually said to him, "I live in fear of the day when I do let you down, because it's almost guaranteed to happen that we'll release something that you won't like."
Yeah, but isn't that lovely that
Um,
someone believes in you that much?
yeah,
That's
yeah,
really cool,
and
isn't
yeah,
it?
it could be a band that he's never heard before. Um, possibly because nobody's heard them before. They're a brand new artist
I
into
mean,
the market.
you're one of the
Um,
few labels that will sign somebody with no social media presence, nothing at all, won't you?
yeah, although we do try and encourage them to develop one.
Yeah.
um,
How's that
it's
going?
yeah, actually not too bad. I mean, what
I
we've done
think
on
most
a couple,
people. I mean, I think I was seen when I first. I was seen as a bit of an eccentric for getting in early on social media and getting behind all that. But I kind of saw it as with a lot of the social stuff. It was sort of 12, 13 years ago. A lot of the big bands didn't really know how to do it, or they couldn't move fast enough to take advantage of it. So it seemed
yeah,
like a really obvious thing to get behind. But now, social media is the mainstream, isn't it? That and if anything, the magazines and that are Krang's just gone this week, hasn't it? I think Q
yes.
magazine, Planet Rock,
Your magazine's looking rocky. Yeah, yeah.
Planet Rock went, didn't it?
But there's
So it's
it's
weird, isn't it?
it's interesting because Simon Godfrey, this was around about the time that we released Shineback, the first Shineback album, which of course was our first release. He said something which I thought was quite interesting, which is that he was looking for the blogs that he did about the Shineback album to do his gigs for him, because
Yeah.
Shineback were not a gigging act.
Mm.
It's basically it's all him and a bunch of studio trickery. Um, Sorry, Simon, that sounded quite harsh. But
It's a great. I mean, it's when you love that record, don't you? Just to be
yeah, I
clear,
do.
I mean, I love
But
that record as well. It's great.
it's a studio project, and it'd be very difficult for him to set that live. It's very difficult for anyone to set that sort of music live. But getting out there on social media and doing his blogs and doing his Facebook posts, that effectively keeps his name going.
Mm.
And you're selling without selling, obviously. I think that's
Yeah,
the important thing to do, is to not make it look like you're in someone's face. There are some artists, and I'm sure you can think of one or two off the top of your head. In fact, we may even be thinking of the same people when I say this, who are just so ridiculously blatant about it, and it's going to piss people off.
well,
Not to put too much.
I think personally, and I've always gone about this, but building community is more important than anything else, because
Yeah,
if you build a city and you build, the Feast of the Dead is a village at the moment, but I'd like it to become a town. That's my ambition. But what I mean, is to
we've
build
got
a
this
small
job.
community online, you can then put a shop in it. You know what I mean? I think that's
Yeah,
but I think if you have to treat people well and with respect, and you have to, and really, someone said the other day, our Facebook group was about our band, and I was like, I felt like, I think I posted it, but ultimately, our Facebook group isn't about our band. Our
no,
Facebook group is about the people who use that Facebook group interacting with each other. We're just a conduit for that. We don't really matter. The people matter. We don't matter. You know what I mean?
it reminds your Facebook group reminds me very much of the Tiny Fish forum going back.
Mm.
Very
Yeah. Well,
similar
that was
sort of thing.
brilliant, wasn't it? As well, it was a really good early example, wasn't it?
There were discussions of all sorts of things, and it's all about building the community and being fairly sort of strict and direct about what you can and can't do and say there. Ruthless moderation. But,
well, I just won't take any. I mean, I won't take any racism, sexism,
no,
homophobia, and
no,
transphobia that we wouldn't get 5 minutes without in our group. You know what I mean?
just basically, people. If people are nice, then
just be nice.
Yeah.
But even when there was the Black Lives Matter thing we put up the other week, a lot of the
Yes.
people saw some really horrible stuff. But in our group, everyone was cool as. Everyone was,
Yeah, it was fine.
We posted. Obviously, we were, supportive of Black Lives Matter, but and we didn't see a single negative comment. Not everyone was cool. But I looked on like the prog ones, and like Stephen Wilson's one really turned up some right unpleasant opinions on the and it wasn't very nice. Life's too short, man. You haven't got time to be.
No.
Kindness and love is all we've got time for. So, David, where do you see where the label will be for the rest of 2020? First of all, where do you see you're going to be for?
Well, funny enough, we're just putting together. Yeah, we had a release schedule for 2020, and that's completely blown out of the water. Well. We're now sort of putting that together. We've got we think 3 CDs coming out later this year, sort of September, October, November time. Not all at the same time, but sort of during the last part of this year. Some of the stuff which we were going to be releasing later this year has been postponed because the bands who are making that want to hopefully promote that with some sort of live work next year. But also, they've perhaps not been able to get access to studios or whatever, or they've had to look after other things rather than spending time making music. So we've got 3 more to do this year. That will probably sort of see us done. We're now starting to sort of dip our toes into 2021 in terms of what we're going to be doing. There was, for instance, a Big Hog album, which was going to be September. That's probably now looking at the early part of next year. Simon's Band's probably something early next year. And, just sort of taking it very steady at the moment and not doing anything too precipitous. We're having to be a little bit careful about what we do. But yeah, we're thinking, it's our quietest year for a long time, but there's a reason for that.
Same for everyone, isn't it? I mean, life's quiet for everybody at the minute, and I think next year you'll probably be able to get things back to normal pretty much. I mean, how long do you think you'll carry on BEM for?
I don't really know. I mean, it's I think as long as it's fun, and it still is fun at the moment. I mean, we're on BEM.
That's how I feel about music, to be honest. I mean, I'll keep doing it as long as because I have days where I don't feel like doing it, and it's because I don't. Ultimately, I could just walk away and not do it anymore.
When we started, I thought if I can make 10 albums, then that would be brilliant. And now I'm sort of thinking, actually, 100's not that far away.
Yeah, I think it'd be a shame if you didn't do 100 now.
I'd love to do 100.
I think it'd be a shame if you didn't.
Even if I have to try and persuade you to make 19 solo albums.
I was going to say I could knock out an ambient album a day for a year for 2 weeks if you want.
Yeah,
it won't be any good, but I can do it.
But get to 100, that'd be brilliant. Someone said to me actually a little while ago, will you stop when you get to 100? Because that seems to be sort of quite a nice.
Seems logical, doesn't it? Yeah.
Do it, and I don't think I will unless I get to 100 and think, you know what, this is just too much. I can't deal with this anymore. We may have reached the stage where it's not viable. Don't know. And if that's the case,
the business model's constantly evolving, constantly changing. I wouldn't have thought. YouTube 5 years ago was somewhere you put videos, right? YouTube now is somewhere you have a community and subscribers, and people watch people on YouTube all the time, and the culture of YouTube has completely changed, hasn't it?
Yeah,
as far as I can see.
People, although mostly I still watch videos about Linux, but there you go.
I watch videos about ZX Spectrum games
and guitar pedals.
Guitar pedals.
I know about you and your guitar pedal habit.
I was talking to My mate Daniel. Remember Daniel from the pedal show? That pedal show.
Yes.
Because I did some gigs with him when he was in that band. What are they called? Really brilliant band. Signed to Esoteric at the same time as I was signed to Esoteric. Daniel with Dave Gregory on guitar. Tin Spirits.
Oh, Tins. Oh, yeah. Of course,
weren't
it's
they?
him, yeah.
Really great band.
Yeah, good band.
Really cool. Really, really, really great band. I did a
Two
few
really
gigs with them.
really great records, and they were
Really
good live
nice
as well.
guys. Really nice guys. And yeah, and he does that pedal show now, and that's what he does. I mean, he's got the gig rig as well, which is all the wiring, but that pedal show is massive. He's got 250,000 subscribers.
Yeah,
it's huge. Yeah. So it just shows you, and that's only developed in the last 5 years, really. That's kind of, I mean, if you'd gone to network television 20 years ago and said, you know, we can make a show about people, you know, holding these small boxes like this.
I knew you'd have one handy.
I got piles of the blooming things. I had to hide them. But, you know, and there'd be tens of thousands, 250,000 people who want to watch those videos. And there'd be more, and if you told network television that'd be more popular than BBC's videos, it just wouldn't, no one would believe you. But it's the way it is now. And so, like I say, the models are constantly evolving. And I think, you know, whilst people say, oh, there's no space for labels anymore, there's no space for things, I think if you can create a community like you've done with Bad Elephant, and that community wants to support you, there will be an audience for however long you want to do it.
Where it could become tricky is if it got to the point where physical sales had dropped off to the point where they just weren't viable.
The thing that scares me is postage.
Yeah, that's gone up a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you got to the stage where physical product wasn't viable and streaming had taken over to the point where it was the only way that people listen to music, I can't see how we would keep going, because there are some bills we need to pay.
Do you think like a Patreon or something like that might be an option at that point?
Possibly it might be, but then at that stage you're sort of thinking, well, how honest is it for us to sort of do that? Because what is Bad Elephant doing in that situation? If all we're doing is we are putting a badge on the music, it becomes part of a community, and we are putting stuff onto streaming platforms for people, which, as you know, you can do yourself. What value are we adding to our clients, to our customers, who are the bands, essentially?
Ultimately, the value they're buying into you as a tastemaker that has their own audience. So, you know, if someone, we could sign to your label, and I know that, you know, a few hundred or a few thousand people will listen to it because it's on Bad Elephant. They might not all be into it, but at least they'll give it a listen. I think most musicians, what they're worried about is not having an audience. It's like, I remember all the musicians worrying about piracy, and I was like, I don't know why you're worried about piracy, because obscurity is your enemy, not piracy. Most musicians, fundamentally, their real problem is they don't have an audience. No one's listening to them. And a lot of the time, it's the musicians with the biggest ego who, you know, they'll make these albums and they'll think they're the most amazing thing ever made. And, you know, that they're serious artists and they should be respected. And then they're the ones terrified of, you know, but just because you've spent loads of money on something and you think it's special doesn't mean it's special. The only thing, you know, doesn't, like, you know, you said with that chap, he spent $8,000 on an album, and
that's a good album, and
there's a lot, you know, I see it a lot of musicians who spend a lot of money on an album and then believe it's worth that amount. It's like, it's only worth what the market feels it's worth, and you have to, you know, and ultimately, if you record an album on a Walkman, on a tape, but it makes people cry or it makes people feel something, ultimately that's of more value than anything. You know, do you some of those punk albums or those early? I mean, my favourite King Crimson album was the USA bootleg album. You know, the version of Starless on that, the USA Starless, which is just, and it sounds like it's recorded in a tin can. recorded on a potato. You know, it's just it's such a wonderful record, but ultimately that's not a posh record, but it makes me weep. You know, it just makes, and same with the Mahavishnu Orchestra live record. That's terribly recorded, but it just makes the hairs on my arms go up even thinking about it. Look how wonderful those records are. That's so exciting now to me. So I just think if you can make something that connects with people and feels real, feels like there's an integrity to it, and it's done with love and kindness, and I think that's more important than, I think music's ultimately about connections with people, isn't it? And
yes,
all that
stuff.
stuff.
I agree. But it's an evolving picture, and one of the things that if my day job's taught me one thing, it's that things change. And that you can make plans until you're blue in the face, but you have to be ready to change those plans if the situation changes. So, Bal Elephant is a very different label to the one that it was when it was founded in 2013, and that's not just because we've got more experience at it and we're arguably better at doing things now than we were then. It's because the model of what we do has changed to fit the circumstances.
I remember 2008, 2009. I remember when we first started getting reviews in magazines. I thought, well, that's it. We've made it now. We've got a review in a magazine. We'll sell 20,000 people read this magazine. Say, I suppose 30% might buy the album. So I dare say we'll be selling, I was getting my calculator out, thinking probably 7,000 copies of this will sell this week. And
still
obviously,
if
you're doing well if you sell 6, you know what I mean? And it's people don't. I think that's why a lot of musicians got very unrealistic expectations, because people buy magazines, but they don't necessarily buy. Say someone buys a rock magazine now, bless the rock audience, but a lot of the rock audience have no interest in contemporary rock music.
No, they just want to read about
Pink Floyd, or Mojo readers want to make sure that Bob Dylan's on the cover again, or the Beatles are on the cover again. And these magazines, they used to be the centre of the scene. Now it's not. They aren't, and I think they're very valuable. And some of my mates write for them. They're brilliant people, but just to get somebody interested in a band, even to get 100 people interested in a band enough to buy a CD is really hard now. You know what I mean? And like I say, I think it's a mixture. The magazines really help. They're really important, and thank goodness for them. But I think there's a lot of other things you have to do as well. You have to gig, you have to be engaging online, you have to make really good music. And I think there is more to what you're doing than just putting a label on stuff, stream. I think exposure to your audience is a massive deal.
Yeah.
Because you've got that brand, you've got the audience. You know what I mean? That's a big deal.
I guess what I meant was if it was just that.
Yeah.
And we were having to sort of find ways of funding it from our own pockets. I don't want to make loads of money out of it, but I don't want to be out of pocket either.
Yeah,
really.
Fair enough.
That's what it boils down to.
Well, especially after doing it for so long as well. I mean, I think what you have to say is the modern term is you're an influencer. You've got. I mean, how many when during your podcast, the height of the podcast, how many downloads was that getting?
8,000 or 9,000.
I mean, that's massive.
Yeah, that was when it was. That was when it was going out weekly. The podcast. I mean, the European perspective has been another sort of very interesting kind of experience.
That's insane, isn't it?
And that's been going for what, nearly 12 years now.
Wow, that's amazing, isn't it?
I'm still doing them. I never learn.
Have you ever thought of turning the European perspective into a YouTube show?
I don't know. Can you do a 5-hour?
You bloody can. I know what you were like. You bloody stop.
I think. Well, this is the thing. The last one was 4 hours 50. So it was. Yeah, it was.
But I think short. You could do the European perspective online, like a YouTube show, because just have all the different artists on and stuff. There's lots you can do with that, and
Yeah,
the audience is still there for you. So, I just want to ask you one final thing before we finish: is how's your solo album going?
well, I got a guitar.
Well, I was going to say you got a guitarist. I'll do it.
Oh, thank you. I mean, yeah.
Loads of musicians who owe you one.
So I've been talking about a solo record for a long time, sort of singer-songwriter type stuff.
I heard some. It's really good.
Oh, thank you. I mean, it's time is the real problem, and going back to what you're saying about the podcast, it's time, because I've got a day job as well, and as we all have, and a family, albeit that my family's sort of kind of grown up. So yeah, sort of sitting down to kind of write and get ideas down is proving difficult. I thought, like everybody else did, oh well, I'm going to have some time on my hands now, but it just hasn't really materialised. Not really been in the mood, to be honest. But
if you're questioning dealing with an apocalypse, this tends to divert your thoughts a little.
Maybe what I need to do is to sort of have a target, which is so in 2024 I'll be 60. Maybe that's the year it needs to be released.
Get it done before. Or you could try and make it the 100th release.
Yeah, that's another possibility.
That'd be cool, wouldn't it?
I wouldn't want to work with Bad Elephant Music. They're bloody
Too touchy.
I was giving myself a rubbish deal.
Cool. Is there anything else you want to plug before we finish?
No, I just want to say thank you, Matt, for inviting me onto your little corner of the internet to sort of talk nonsense about this funny little record label, but also thank you and the Fierce and the Dead for your loyalty in sort of sticking with the label right from the early days. I mean, Spooky Action was number 2. It was the second one, and we all
learned together, though, didn't we? Really,
we did. I mean, yeah, those first half dozen releases were real seat of the pants stuff. I think for us.
I just it's difficult because, like I say, you're my friend. I always worry that we're not going to make the money back for you, and I'm always. The first few months after the release, I'm terrified we're not going to make the money back. But it's always worked, hasn't it? And thank you for everything.
The irony is, you worry the most about it, and actually, I'm the least worried about the Fierce and the Dead.
But I just worry that I don't want to feel like it because, and the team at Bad Elephant, Martin, they're all brilliant, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean,
we've got a great team.
We've got a small team, and it's an international team as well. We've got Martin, who runs. He's international. He's from Yorkshire, which is of course a different country.
He's a lovely dude.
He runs the shop. Again, we didn't think we'd have a shop. We thought we'd probably be selling mostly through resellers, but actually most of what we shift is through the Bandcamp store.
It's where the margin is there.
So we've got Martin in that, Stefan in over in Germany. He's the production manager, so he keeps all that in line. We've got Lisa, who's the lady who does press for us now. She's in the US. We've got James Turner, who's in Bristol, and then of course there's the sleeping partner, James Allen, who started this with me back in 2013 when we set things up, and it's always useful to have a solicitor on your side. You never know when you might need him. But James, also a huge music fan, sort of seen at gigs all over the country. And yeah, that's the team effectively. And it's,
I think James was the first person I met of the sort of British progressive music scene about 12 years ago.
Yes.
He discovered me on MySpace. No, it's probably about 14 years ago. He found me, James did. And
he was always being found just to one side of the stage with his little notebook.
In his shorts.
The Leon Camfield from Tiny Fish used to call him Notebook. That was his nickname for him. Yeah, Notebook.
Leon's a legend, isn't he? But James is a seriously nice dude. He's like massively intelligent as well. He's super sharp.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But Yeah, James was, because when I first started going to prog gigs, James was always there. I mean, James doesn't really do gigs so much now, does he?
He doesn't. He's pretty busy with other things
He's a
now.
very fit man, isn't he?
He does all this sort of fitness stuff and
Yeah, he's
all
a
that.
great dude, James.
And
But
he's got into sort of more sort of classical music and stuff like
mm,
that, and goes to lots of recitals. So he's less and less often at sort of prog gigs. Yeah.
but me and David have fought the prog wars for the last 10 years, haven't we?
We have, yes.
We've been to a lot of
heroic.
prog gigs. We've had a lot of curries.
I like
Had
to
a lot of
think
good
of it as
times, mate, haven't we?
Yeah.
Had a lot of times. To be honest, I remember there's one thing. We went to that thing in Blackpool together. And we
Oh,
was
Electric Garden.
laughing all weekend. It was so
That was a
funny.
weekend. That was so. The best part of that was walking back that night when the rain started. Walking back from the venue to the bed and breakfast, and the rain came down, and it was horizontal.
It was grim,
And
wasn't it?
you just got so wet. We were just laughing our heads off. It was
And
really
in
funny.
because it was Blackpool, there was always like various young ladies and young gentlemen in the every sort of copying
Stag
off.
and hen do,
Yeah,
basically.
it was. I was terrified. I mean, I'm no good with that sort of thing anyway. But I think I'd had 2 or 3 pints. I wasn't drunk. But I was glad I'd had it because I was just glad to get back to the thing. But yeah, I mean that was a good do, wasn't it? But
And
yeah,
the brown sea and the giant parrot.
yeah, yeah, a lot of
It
good
was a
times.
strange weekend.
But we've been to lots of gigs. David, we went to Rozfest together, didn't we?
We did. Yeah, I'm wearing the t-shirt.
That was epic. Yeah. That was, wasn't it?
That was a weekend and a half. I will never forget. I will never forget because I went over a few days in advance and stayed with Simon and Stacey in Philadelphia for a few days, and then we all went down to Rozfest together in Gettysburg. And Gettysburg, for those of you who don't know, is actually a very odd town because it's like a tourist town effectively.
Yeah.
The thing it's famous for is the big battle, the Civil War battle. And we went down there, and you and the guys had arrived at the hotel just before us, and we got to the hotel, and I said, "Yeah, let's find out where Matt is." And I found you just came up to me and just said, "This is really weird. This is really, really weird." And that was all you said to me most of the weekend.
This
is just so weird.
It was surreal. It was
a mad weekend.
It was totally surreal. I mean, totally didn't. I mean, in the truest sense, it didn't seem real. I think because I had such little amount of sleep, and we're in a completely wrong environment. And also, I've been drinking all weekend as well. I mean, everything.
And weren't you recovering from a cold?
I hadn't been very well, no. And then I had, I got back and I got tonsillitis.
Yeah.
So I was really ill. And obviously, a few months after that, I got really, really ill. That's when the cancer thing started and all that. So it was.
We went out for dinner one night and we ordered fish and chips. And it was crisp.
Yeah.
I remember the expression on Stu's face. It's like he wasn't dealing very well with that.
No, it was weird. The whole thing was just. I mean, I'm really glad we did it. We had so much fun, but
it was lovely. It was a very good weekend. It was a very.
The Americans are just so nice. They're lovely.
It was. Everyone was lovely.
They're the coolest people, aren't they? But
yeah, George was great.
Bonkers, wasn't it?
Brilliant. Yeah, it was.
Right, well, we're done, mate.
Good stuff. Thank you, Matt.
David, thank you so much, and thank you for everything, and thank you to everybody at Bad Elephant. We love you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You take care, and we'll talk soon.